Alright, and we back on the forecast. Now, we as a collective have to stop acting like the situation that we are in is brand new. It's been hundreds of years already and countless casualties. But people still saying it's 2019, it's 2020, it's 2040. I can't believe this still exists. But it will continue to exist until we destroy it. We are the only ones that can destroy it. It is the reason why they've always targeted us and see us as their biggest threat. Because they understand when enough of us get to the point of by any means necessary, then they can't stop us. And they can't stop us now because it's an energy. It's not an individual person. But doing the same thing over and over and over again is insanity. How many times did the same thing need to happen for us to learn? The Harlem race riot of 1964 started because of the same things that's still happening today. A white off-duty cop shot and killed a 15-year-old black teenager. Now, this 15-year-old brother, James Powell, was at Sunday school, and him and some of his friends were sitting outside on the stoop. So while they were waiting for Sunday school to start, a white dude, Patrick Lynch, who was the superintendent of a building across the street, told these black teenagers they had to move even though it was none of his business. This white dude then started spraying them with a water hose and saying stuff like, "You dirty nigga, I'll wash you clean." So in retaliation, the black teenagers started throwing bottles and threw a trash can lid back at him. So then this off-duty cop, Thomas Gilligan, said he saw what happened and then ran to the scene. And when he got there, he claimed he fired a warning shot that hit the window of a nearby apartment. Then he shot 2 more times and ended up hitting his 15-year-old brother James Powell, killing him. A pathologist said that if he would have received medical attention right away, he might not have died. But they didn't give him any help. They left him there to die. And right after he was shot, about 300 teenagers from his school went outside and started protesting. Now, the cop, Thomas Gilligan, said this brother James Powell had a knife and came towards him. So he had no other choice but to open fire, a familiar story. But dozens of witnesses said this brother didn't have a gun or any weapons. So then the day after the shooting, the organization CORE went down to the police station demanding a civilian review board. The same review boards that we demand today. But when they went, they were met by 50 cops holding nightsticks. Then by noon, 200 people were out there chanting, "Stop killer cops. We want legal protection and end police brutality." The same chants that we still do today. Now, even though the first 2 days of the protests were relatively peaceful, on the third day, about 250 people went to James Powell's funeral. And then after it ended, people started marching to the police precinct. And they were calling for this cop, Thomas Gilligan, to be fired. The same way we asked for these cops today to be fired. Then at some point, things started getting escalated. And the crowd started throwing bricks, bottles, and anything they could find at the police. And then the police started hitting people in the crowd with their batons. By 10 o'clock that night, more than 1,000 people showed up and they were still throwing bricks and whatever they could find at the police. Then about 10:30, they started splitting up into smaller groups. Then started throwing Molotov cocktails in the cop cars. And at least one cop got hurt. So then the police got permission to start using their gun and they started shooting into the crowd. And at least one person got killed. And as soon as the police started shooting their guns, a truck full of ammunition was brought in for them. The police started attacking, arresting, and beating up black people that had nothing to do with it. In their eyes, if you were black outside, you were guilty. And the violence lasted until about 8 o'clock the next morning. When it was over, 1 person was killed, 31 people were injured, but the hospital said there were at least 7 people treated for gunshot wounds and closer to 110 people that were injured. So then later that morning, the police commissioner sent a letter to every black church in Harlem, and he said this is a crime problem, not a social problem. Meaning racism and white supremacy had nothing to do with it. This is just niggas being violent again. In response, Malcolm X said there are probably more armed Negroes in Harlem than any other spot on the earth. And if the people who are armed get involved, you can bet they'll really have something on their hands. And during a meeting of the Black Citizens Council, some people started talking about guerrilla warfare. But then later that same day, when people went to the funeral home for the service held for James Powell, allegedly one of them threw a bottle at the police. And then the police threw it back and the riot started again. Then after somebody threw a Molotov cocktail, the police ended up shooting 2 black men. By the time the violence came to an end around 1:30 in the morning, a lot of Molotov cocktails were thrown and at least 2 black men were shot by the police. And also 1 cop had a heart attack. It was reported that 120 people were injured, including 27 cops. and 108 people were arrested. But the hospital said it was closer to 200 people being injured. So then the next day, the New York County grand jury finally announced they were going to investigate James Powell murder. So then that day, the organization CORE put together an all-day rally against police brutality. And then at some point during the day, the police called in backup even though it was peaceful. Then when the crowd got to about 1,000 people, the police started attacking the crowd. And they didn't make any distinction about which black person was involved and which person wasn't. They feel like everybody could get it. And the violence lasted until about 7 o'clock the next morning. But after it was over, the organization CORE announced they were going to have another rally in 12 hours. And again, during a rally, another riot started when the police charged the crowd. So the crowd threw bottles and rocks back at them. And the violence lasted until about 2 o'clock in the morning. It was estimated that 500 people were injured, 1 person died, and 465 people were arrested. Then, in the end, the grand jury cleared the cop Thomas Gilligan of all charges, saying he didn't do anything wrong. And his cops still claimed his brother James Powell lunged at him with a knife. And by 1964, the people were tired of the nonviolent movement, of getting beat up and not fighting back. So they decided to fight back. But in 1964, the cops said this black teenager lunged at him with a knife, and he had no other choice but to shoot him. And the grand jury didn't even indict him, saying he didn't do anything wrong. And here it is close to 60 years later, and literally the same things are happening over and over and over. In Kansas City, a brother Cameron Lamb was shot and killed by Kansas City police. So let's see how this brother ended up getting killed by the police while he was in his own yard.
The family of a Kansas City man shot and killed by police 1 week ago is now demanding answers.
Police responded to the area of 35th and College for a disturbance between people in 2 vehicles. The police helicopter saw one of the vehicles and then helped lead officers to a home on 41st Street. That's where 26-year-old Cameron Lamb was shot and killed.
His family has hired a high-profile civil rights attorney to represent them. KCTV5's Leslie Aguilar spoke with that attorney and police. Leslie?
Right now, that attorney is doing his own investigation into exactly what happened last week when Cameron Lamb was shot and killed in his own backyard. Police say he's been spreading false information on social media. Lee Merritt is a self-described social justice activist and attorney. He's defended many high-profile cases of black men and women shot and killed by police.
2019 is on pace to be one of the bloodiest years on record for the use of police force. However, we're also seeing indictments more often. We're seeing convictions more often of law enforcement officers. And so we're going to continue to press.
Merritt announced on Twitter yesterday that he's representing the family of Cameron Lamb. He's the man shot and killed by Kansas City police last Tuesday. On Twitter and Instagram, Merritt called it murder. KCPD clapped back with their own account of what happened. But that's not stopping a flood of criticism towards the department on social media.
We're hoping that law enforcement will learn that there is accountability if they use deadly force without the proper justification.
Kansas City police say Lamb pointed a gun at one of 2 detectives who followed him behind his house to find out why he was involved in a disturbance a few blocks away. The other detective shot him. Both cops were dressed in plain clothes, but with black ballistic vests marked police. Merritt says there were a lot of holes in that account of what happened.
The family of Cameron Lamb is asking the community to stand with them and demand transparency and demand just a respect of that family. They should not have questions a week later as to what happened.
Now, we just got a statement from Kansas City Police that details what led up to that shooting. It includes a transcript of radio traffic between officers.
So this brother Cameron Lamb had got into an argument with his girlfriend. The police say they were at another traffic stop when they saw one car chasing another. And that was his brother Cameron Lamb and his girlfriend. And I don't know what they were fighting about, but a police helicopter ended up following his brother. Now, mind you, this brother was at his own house. He was never pulled over. Nobody ever said anything about what happened. He probably didn't even realize the police saw him. And this brother was in his own yard, minding his own business, working on cars, because that's what he does for a living. So then out of nowhere, 2 plainclothes cops approached him in his yard. Then according to one of the cops, he saw this brother pointing a gun at the other cop. Now, of course, the police aren't going to give out the cop's name. But even if this brother did have a gun, and Kansas City is a carry state, And in Kansas City, there aren't any requirements to get a gun permit. Well, I guess the requirements are the amount of melanin you have. But on paper, there are no requirements. But if you did have a gun, who wouldn't pull it out when somebody is randomly walking into your backyard, especially if it's night? Now, even though they're still supposed to be investigating, the police, of course, already have their capes on.
A local family is looking for answers when it comes after police shot and killed their loved one. This all happened more than a week ago.
Yeah, 41 Action News reporter Mackenzie Nelson talked with Cameron Lamb's family today. Mackenzie.
Well, Cameron Lamb's family says that they only know what's been reported by us. And as Kansas City police investigate what led up to that shooting, the family has an attorney doing its own investigation.
That was the worst day of my life.
It was the call no mother wants to get.
You just don't think that someone is going to call you and give you that news if that was supposed to be me. I should not have been sitting down with that funeral director on yesterday planning my son's funeral.
Lori Bay says her son, Cameron Lamb, wasn't perfect, but was a great kid and father to 3 young boys.
He was my baby. He was my youngest. He was my only son. He was so fun and loving.
Lamb was shot and killed by Kansas City police on December 3rd. Police say Lamb was driving a red pickup truck that was chasing a purple Mustang through town. Officers in a police helicopter followed Lamb and alerted officers on the ground when he backed into a lot behind a house near 41st and College Avenue.
It was not actually his home, but this is where he resided.
Detectives followed Lamb behind his house and say he pointed a gun at an officer. Another officer then opened fire. Investigators on scene said a gun was found next to the truck Lamb was sitting in. Lamb's mother wants answers and has lawyers working to get them.
Well, absolutely, there was no reason to use deadly force in this situation, so I absolutely disagree with that.
This week, the family met with the Jackson County Prosecutor's Office. Officials there say they are following protocol for an officer-involved shooting. Now planning a funeral for her son. Bay says she's received help from a stranger.
There's nothing I can do to change the past. Only thing I can do is try to help, relieve some stress and some pressure. And for me, it was reaching out to the family and see if I can find any, provide any financial, relief.
Bay says the help is a relief as she fights for answers.
I know nothing. I'm still waiting for answers.
Now, the detectives that were involved in the shooting were on administrative leave, but I'm told by police that they are back to full duty now. And as for the family, this Saturday at noon at the place where the shooting took place, there will be a balloon release to honor Cameron Lamb.
Now, they claim this brother had a gun. They said he was laying outside the driver's side window and the gun was on the ground. But people have a right not to be harassed on their own property. You can't randomly walk up on somebody while they're minding their business in their own yard, especially after we seen a white woman bust into somebody's apartment and shoot them dead. And of course, the police aren't saying much besides making excuses to justify it. And these cops, who they're protecting their identity, will get their paid vacation and be right back on the streets patrolling.
The family of a man shot and killed by Kansas City police last week just met with the county prosecutor, and now they have new demands for the department.
KCTV5's Leslie Aguilar spoke with the family and their attorneys.
Right now, the family takes issue with the fact the police statement detailing what exactly happened came out an entire week after Cameron Lamb was killed. They find that suspicious, and they want the officer who used deadly force to be held accountable. Cameron Lamb's family is living a nightmare.
But nothing compares to the pain that I'm going through right now.
26-year-old was a father who had recently started a business.
Cameron was a loving young man. He had 3 children. He continuously spent time with them. He found his niche for working on vehicles, and that's what he would do. That's what he was doing earlier that day before this thing arrived. He was going back home to continue to work on vehicles.
After meeting with the Jackson County prosecutor about Lamb's death, the family has hope they might feel some sort of justice in the future.
We agree on some fundamental things. Number one, Cameron Lamb was a victim. He was a victim of the Kansas City Police Department.
Lee Merritt represents the family.
We're calling on the Kansas City Police Department to release the name of this officer the same way they would any other criminal. We're calling on them to arrest him, mugshot him so that everyone can see his face.
KCPD released a statement yesterday detailing what led up to the shooting. They say an officer working a nearby traffic accident saw a red truck speed by pursuing another vehicle. The police helicopter saw the truck split from that car and pull into a house on 41st Street. The statement includes a transcript of radio communication between police as they approached Lamb's house. Two detectives approached from different directions. One officer saw Lamb point a gun at the other officer and shoot him in his own driveway inside his vehicle. The family is skeptical of that account.
Cameron was not involved in any criminal activity at the time that he was murdered or any time before then.
Merritt says Lamb was in a brief dispute with a girlfriend that caused that pursuit, but Lamb was never pursued by police and had no idea they wanted to speak with him.
Police say they do have helicopter footage of what happened with Lamb and police that day. They say they can't release it because it could be used as evidence in a potential criminal matter.
Now, this brother Cameron Lamb's family said they questioned the police story. This brother wasn't a criminal. And his family even said it could be a case of mistaken identity because we do all fit the description. But we have to understand the society that we are in. You can't even get into an argument with your girlfriend without possibly being murdered later. Even though he was never pulled over, nobody ever told him why they were questioning him. They just showed up in his brother's backyard and shot and killed him. And because he may have a gun, that's a good enough reason. But that's what happens when you live in somebody else's society. We don't have any other choice but to get on code so we can destroy it. At the end of the day, we are all we got. And until we learn that, then the same thing will keep happening over and over.
Trayvon Martin case, George Zimmerman, the man found not guilty of murder after shooting and killing Martin, is now suing Martin's family and others for $100 million. Steve Osensami has the story. Good morning, Steve.
Good morning to you, George. We should underline that this lawsuit makes wild claims that prosecutors say shouldn't even be taken seriously. But nonetheless, George Zimmerman is taking this case to court. He's suing for $100 million. George Zimmerman, who was acquitted in 2013 of the murder of Trayvon Martin, is suing the teen's parents, their attorney, state police, and former state prosecutors. In a lawsuit filed in Florida, he's making the unsubstantiated claim that this young woman, Rachel Jeantel, was a fake witness, coached into her testimony by prosecutors and the victim's family. On the witness stand, she testified that she was on the phone with the unarmed black teenager as Zimmerman was shooting him to death. But the suit accuses her of somehow standing in for her half-sister who didn't want to testify in the case and says that prosecutors and police were all in on it.
He said, "Why are you following me for?" And then I heard a hard breath man come and say, "What you doing around here?"
The lawyer filing the lawsuit has a long history of pushing conspiracy theories and suing black lawmakers. Critics call Larry Klayman pathologically litigious. He once submitted a petition to deport President Obama, and his legal tactics have gotten sanctions and bans from some courtrooms. This lawsuit is coming at the same time Zimmerman is featured in and is promoting a new movie. The film makes these same accusations. Trayvon Martin's family says they feel victimized yet again, calling this another failed attempt to defend the indefensible, and they accuse Zimmerman of trying to make a buck. Zimmerman's lawyer is being called out this morning for publicly sharing the contact information of former witnesses and former prosecutors, including one who's now a circuit court judge. In these same documents, Zimmerman's contact information is redacted.
But like I told you, the reason it's intimidating is because, yes, but we know that as African Americans, understand this, bro. Like, and you're an ex-football player, so you're bigger than the average person, period. And you're also an African American. We're in Arizona. I don't have to tell you about what the demographics are in Arizona. They don't see people like you a lot. I'm from Atlanta. I see people like you all the time. You see what I'm saying? So I get it, but that doesn't mean that everybody gets it.
But I don't mean that. I got you. I understand what you're saying. But a client is a client.
JP Morgan's racist practice exposed in bombshell secret recording. JP Morgan Chase came face to face with allegations of uniform and national discrimination against black financial advisors, which resulted in the financial institution agreeing to pay 6 current and former employees $19.5 million in a settlement. Fortune reported last year that the details of the lawsuit, including black financial advisors being assigned to poor black branches, understaffing them, and failing to include them in a program for richer clients. The New York Times has released the recordings, one of which reveals Jimmy Kennedy, a former NFL defensive tackle, being given the runaround when he merely wanted to secure and invest his earnings, $800,000 to be more specific. Kennedy tried to become a private client with the institution, which would afford him a number of perks, including travel discounts, exclusive event invitations, and better deals on loans.
Now turning to a local political story that has a lot of people fired up. The chair of the Galveston County Republican Party is facing backlash over a text message. Some of the state's top Republicans are calling for her resignation. Stephanie Whitfield joins us from the newsroom with that story.
Yolanda Waters calls the text message a typo, but members of her own party aren't buying it. A spokesman for Governor Greg Abbott's office calls the language abhorrent and reprehensible. Galveston County Republican Party Chair Yolanda Waters is facing calls for resignation over a racist text message referring to a member of her own party. The Galveston Daily News reports Waters was texting a party secretary when she called J.T. Edwards the N-word. Edwards is a state Republican executive committee man. He released a statement calling the text shocking. He wrote, "One of our own recently perceived a political fundraising solicitation as behavior typical of my demographic and called it out using a racial epithet."
It'd be best if she packed her bags and went home.
The chairman of the Harris County GOP is joining other Republicans' calls for her resignation.
Ironically, I've known J.T. Edwards, the target of her text message, for years and highly respect his principles, his leadership, his ability. And for this new chair to come into Galveston County and start doing these kinds of things is horrendous.
Waters hasn't returned phone calls or emails, but she sent a statement to the Galveston Daily News calling the text a typo. She described herself as a Latina African-American woman. She told the paper, "I'm saddened and hurt that anyone believes I'm racist against my own people." Governor Abbott's spokesman says as soon as they found out about the text message, Waters was asked to resign from her position on a state-appointed board. She has done so, but now Waters told the Galveston Daily News she plans to keep her position as the chair in Galveston County.
It is a video making the rounds on social media, and it has Metro Police, quote, very concerned. So much so, they have decommissioned the officer caught on camera while they conduct an investigation. News Channel 5's Jason Lamb has an update on what happens next.
Tonight, Metro Police say Officer Barrett Teague has been stripped of his police power for the time being and given a desk job, while police investigators look into what happened during this police stop on Wednesday. The question, did Teague use excessive force? The video shows an interaction between Teague and a woman police identify as Miss Ensley at a Z-Mart gas station on Dickerson Pike. At one point, Teague grabs Ensley and throws her several times against other vehicles. Metro Police say it was yesterday afternoon when they became aware of the video, telling us in a statement in part, quote, "The administration of the MNPD and Officer Teague's supervisors at the East Precinct are very concerned with what the video shows." While police say Teague has been decommissioned, the chair of Nashville's Community Oversight Board said several people sent them the video and that they'll be starting an investigation which calls for an impartial review and investigation into police misconduct allegations. This procedure will ensure that available video and witness statements are fully reviewed and considered prior to a final report and recommendation being issued to the Community Oversight Board.
They took an oath to serve and protect the people of St. Louis. But tonight, 4 city police officers are off the job after they were indicted on federal felony charges. Good evening, I'm Mike Bush.
And I'm Ann Allred. The charges stem from last year's violent protest that followed last year's acquittal of former officer Jason Stockley. Our investigative reporter Jacob Long covered that story for us in 2017. And tonight, he's live outside the federal courthouse with a look at the evidence. Jacob.
Well, Mike and Ann, the evidence in this case is certainly eye-opening to say the least. We're talking about a series of text messages between these 4 officers that talk about how they were actually excited and looking forward to inflicting excessive force on the Jason Stockley protesters, including one of their own, a fellow city officer. Tonight, this alleged behavior being condemned by city officials across the board who say the officers need to be held accountable to the fullest extent of the law.
September 17th, 2017.
For a third night, protests erupted in St. Louis after the acquittal of former police officer Jason Stockley in the shooting death of Anthony Lamar Smith. Officers Dustin Boone, Randy Hayes, Christopher Myers, and Bailey Coletta were all assigned to a protest response unit called the Civil Disobedience Team. According to a federal indictment made public on Thursday, the 4 city officers have been charged with various felony charges, including civil rights violations, destruction of evidence, and obstruction of justice. According to the indictment, text messages show that Boone, Hayes, and Myers expressed disdain for the Stockley protesters and excitement about using unjustified force against them. In one exchange, Boone wrote, quote, "It's gonna get ignorant tonight, but it's gonna be a lot of fun beating the expletive out of these expletives once the sun goes down and nobody can tell us apart." In another, Boone writes, quote, "We really need these expletives to start acting up so we can have some fun." And in another text, Boone wrote, quote, "It's still a blast beating people that deserve it, and I'm not one of the people hurt, so I'm still enjoying each night." Boone, Hayes, and Myers are also accused of using excessive force and beating up an undercover city police officer who's also a 22-year veteran of the force that was assigned that same night to cover the protests. Coletta, meantime, who the indictment says was in a romantic relationship with Hayes at the time, allegedly lied about it all when testifying before the grand jury. Together, the 4 officers range in age from 27 to 35 and have a combined experience with the city of nearly 15 years. But now they are all on unpaid administrative leave.
Now, it's important to point out that after these allegations of brutality first surfaced last year, the city's the one who asked the Justice Department to step in and investigate. And these charges tonight are the result of that lengthy, extensive FBI investigation. Some of the charges carrying a maximum penalty of 20 years in prison. And the fallout tonight just beginning. We've heard from the circuit attorney in St. Louis who says because of the 4 officers, they've had to dismiss more than 90 cases already.
A Starbucks barista is fired after she wrote the word pig on the cups of 5 Oklahoma police officers. The officers reported the incident to their police chief, Johnny O'Mara, who shared a picture of one of the offensive cups, which led to public outrage. Jen Smith joins us now from our New York newsroom with more. And Jen, what's happened to the barista and has she apologized to the officers?
Jesse, the Starbucks employee did contact the officers and said that the label was meant to be a joke and apologized, but it was too little too late for Starbucks, which fired her afterwards, saying in a statement, "The Starbucks partner who wrote this offensive word on a cup used poor judgment and is no longer a partner after this violation of company policy." But this barista has support from an unlikely source, a woman claiming to be Police Chief O'Mara's daughter. A Twitter user going by the name Miss O'Mara wrote, "This is my father, and I'd like to say that he is absolutely a pig, and I'd like to thank the brave men and women from Starbucks for their service." The woman continued, "For the record, my father has zero business being a police officer. He was blatantly, proudly racist when I was a kid, said things I would never repeat. He treats women like dogs, including his own daughter. Oink, oink."
Well, tonight a 49ers broadcaster has been suspended for inappropriate comments he made about the Baltimore Ravens quarterback following Sunday's game. On a radio show Monday, radio color analyst Tim Ryan said QB Lamar Jackson, who is black, is skilled at faking handoffs because of his, quote, dark skin color with a dark football. Jackson rushed for more than 100 yards as he led the Ravens past the 49ers on Sunday. The team released this statement saying, "We are disappointed in Tim Ryan's comments earlier this week and have suspended him for the upcoming game." Tim has expressed remorse in a public statement and has also done so with us privately. Now, Ryan released his own statement saying, quote, "I regret my choice of words in trying to describe the conditions of the game. Lamar Jackson is an MVP caliber player and I respect him greatly. I want to sincerely apologize to him."
Again, Jason, with the high school playoff game that ended in chaos. Now we're getting new clues into what may have set the whole thing off. And we'll start there on Local 4 News at 5. Tonight, Almont School Superintendent promising an investigation into the fight during its playoff game against Detroit Denby and allegations of racist behavior in the stands.
Victor Williams is live at Denby High School tonight, and Victor, players from both teams had to be escorted off the field.
Yes, absolutely. Things got very heated out there on the gridiron, but both sides agree that what happened at this football game was very unnecessary.
You got adults, racial slurs, spitting, this, that, and the other. It's sad.
Denby High football parent Patrick McKnight says it's an absolute shame what took place following the semifinals of the state championship between Denby and Almont High. Chaos among Denby football players and spectators in support of Almont.
You got to keep in mind you're dealing with a bunch of kids.
But what led to this happening in the first place? The Detroit Public Schools Community District sent us this statement regarding the incident, which reads, based upon preliminary findings, it's our understanding that Almont adult spectators were cursing and spitting on our coaches and players after the game while leaving the field. But Almont Community School District Superintendent Dr. William Calmer, who was there, says that's not the case, at least from his perspective.
While there were jeers and taunts, I did not necessarily hear anything that I would consider to be racial epithets or racial slurs. I'm not saying they didn't happen. I'm just saying that we don't have evidence of it.
Dr. Calmer and both the principal as well as the athletic director all agree that there were some agitators among the Almont crowd, but if any are proven to have used racial slurs, they'll face major consequences.
If they're members of our community that poured gasoline on the fire, so to speak, we're working to identify those, and if we find out who they are, they're going to be banned from our campus in any event.
And we're also told there was a lot of back and forth going on by way of social media between the both of these schools, but both of these districts are handling an investigation regarding this incident.
Charges of racism on the campus of an Orange County high school. This one happening at Santa Margarita Catholic High School. KCAL 9 Orange County reporter Stacey Butler is live tonight in Rancho Santa Margarita with this disturbing message posted on social media. Stacey?
Susie, the student did attend Santa Margarita Catholic High here, but the diocese says that ever since she posted that video yesterday, they've asked her not to come back.
I can't believe it. It's atrocity. It's depressing. I thought we were beyond that.
Strong reaction tonight in the affluent community of Rancho Santa Margarita after a student at Santa Margarita Catholic High posted this video showing an African-American family touring the school. It's only 3 seconds on Snapchat, but it's not the video that's disturbing. It's the racially charged text, a message of hate that references a dark period in history when slaves were forced to pick cotton. Now, that student has been expelled.
I back the school 100%. There should be zero tolerance. There should be, I don't see color.
In a statement issued tonight, the Diocese of Orange said, in clear contradiction to the views and values of Santa Margarita Catholic High School, a student posted an inappropriate and insensitive message yesterday on social media. The individual responsible for the message is no longer a student at Santa Margarita High School.
Good riddance to her. She should have been expelled.
A student posted this. We showed the video to a number of parents who declined on-camera interviews. The diocese said they teach children to respect and cherish diversity and that all people are created in the likeness of God.
The fact that, we are in Orange County, I think that they probably wanted to show an example that this is not acceptable here.
And the diocese says they will be talking about this at the school, and also they're encouraging parents to talk to their kids about this message.
This comes after an African-American student has come forward saying that students from a frat used a racial slur against her. The students involved are identified as members of the Alpha Chi Rho House, and the university is now suspending the frat, saying it would discipline the students to the full extent of the law. And they're taking it one step further. Now all Greek life social events have been suspended for the rest of the semester at Syracuse. The school chancellor saying, while only one frat may have been involved in this particular incident, given recent history, all frats need to come together to prevent such seriously troubling behavior. Syracuse administrators also releasing a video last night on how the university plans to address racism on campus.
Deep issues require deep solutions. My colleagues and I are focused on reviewing and revising our code of student conduct, hiring and retaining a diverse staff to support and serve our students, building on the foundation in our residence halls so that staff are appropriately trained to be sensitive to the needs of all of our students. Your residence hall is your home, and it should feel safe and welcoming.
The rash of incidents started November 7th when police found a freshman dorm vandalized with slurs against Black and Asian people. That led to protests because the university didn't notify the public for nearly a week after it happened. Now we've had 6 incidents of racist symbols and language in the last 10 days, and the Department of Public Safety now offering $50,000 reward for information leading to an arrest of the person behind this.
After apparent racist and threatening blog posts spread around MSU by a student, the university and its students are reacting.
Yeah, MSU officials released this statement addressing concerns of free speech being used to, quote, elicit or incite illegal activity or threaten persons or communities. The statement goes on to offer counseling, adding, quote, together we can safeguard inclusion, enhance respect for diversity, and strengthen our already vibrant multicultural campus. We are stronger together.
MSU students are already using their voices to expose the person who allegedly made comments of racism and hate, including one who used social media to alert other students.
I want students to feel like motivated to do something about it, you know, not to attack him or to do anything, because we don't want that either. I want to come and be united from this and make a little bit of noise and to kind of pressure him and maybe even the university to do something more.
What's being called a racist school survey is creating outrage on the campus of Michigan State University.
It was created by a professor who used derogatory terms and offensive stereotypes that he took from social media.
7 Action News reporter Rudy Harper digging for answers for us tonight.
A diverse crowd of students now speaking out tonight. They were face to face with administrators, but they say they want those administrators to address the racial tensions here on campus.
If a person comes to me with an issue, I'm going to address the issue off top.
Outrage and disappointment on MSU campus.
The same people who said it could have been a prank are not black.
A full house at a forum for discussion on racial bias and recent racist incidents. Students now rally to push for awareness and a plea for a voice.
We aren't being heard.
Scared. There's multiple incidents that have happened just in 1 week.
Some of the controversy stems from a survey on an MSU website that included racist and offensive statements targeting Black people, the LGBTQ community, Muslims, and Asians. A select group of students asked to rate the questions from not at all negative to extremely negative. The Morning Watch, a news outlet, screen grabbed some of the survey.
There was no ill intention in any way, shape, or form for this study.
MSU Associate Professor Dr. Shalim Alabash said the survey was part of a research project and the questions were taken directly from social media. He says the intent was not to offend the student body, especially minority students.
I and the department and the college do realize that the impact that this might have had is painful and hurtful, and we deeply apologize for that.
Although his intentions could have been a certain thing, they were not perceived like that. And so now we have to deal with the outcome.
Racial tensions are at a boiling point after a Black student found a noose hung on the handle of her dorm room door. The university says students admitted it was part of a Halloween prank and not meant to offend anyone or denote any racial bias or resemble a noose. Some of these student leaders say the university has a systemic racism issue.
We will no longer stand for this.
MSU's president releasing a statement to the Spartan community saying in part that he's concerned and his top priority is inclusion and a respectful campus. The Black Student Alliance will meet with him tomorrow.
A former tennis coach at Red Rock Country Club says she was fired because of her biracial children.
And now she's suing. Fox 5's Christopher Redfern's live in studio tonight to share their story.
Carmel Mary Hill was fired from her position as a tennis coach way back in 2016, and today she was finally able to file a lawsuit against Red Rock Country Club for racial discrimination. Mary Hill says the original incident happened more than 2 years ago at the club's annual tennis tournament. Carmel was a coach there, and she had one of her kids with her that day.
I brought her to work, and I guess that a member had a problem with my kid being at work.
But Mary Hill says it wasn't just because there was a kid at the club. There's always kids there. This member had a problem with her kid specifically.
Apparently she asked whose black kid is that.
Then took it even further when the member went and complained to management.
I'm okay with them attacking me because I'm an adult and I can handle it, even though it hurts me. But when you attack a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old,
Mama, I'm going to be drawing you and me on a hill.
Because they're mixed? That's not okay with me.
Less than a week later, Carmel lost her job.
My boss called me in the office and fired me. And I said, what for? And he was really upset about it. And I said, what for? And he said, I don't know. And I said, well, you can't fire someone if you don't know why you're firing them. He said it came from the GM.
Pretty much straight away, she went to the Nevada Equal Rights Commission and filed a complaint. NERC then launched an investigation into the country club.
They found them guilty of discrimination because of color of skin. And they also found them guilty of retaliation because after they fired me and I filed, they got the letter, then they banned me from coming on the premises.
NERC declared Mary Hill had a right to sue. That was last month, and today she filed that lawsuit.
And since the case has come out, I've had people say thank you. I was discriminated against at Red Rock, and I appreciate you standing up for what's right.
Mary Hill and her legal team are seeking full front and back pay, employment benefits, punitive damages, compensatory damages, and coverage for legal costs. Now, we did reach out to Red Rock Country Club today. They haven't responded.
Picture this scene. It's after midnight in a Maryland forest in 1949. A small group of slaves, tired and scared, waiting in a moonlit clearing, hoping, praying that Black Moses will come conduct them to freedom. Just then, a woman appears from out of the trees, the moonlight reflecting off her red hair and pale freckled skin. A man whispers, "It's her! Praise be to God! It's her!" as she pauses to apply some SPF 40, because you can never be too careful. After seeing them with her light hazel eyes, she flashes her familiar pretty woman smile and says, "Hey, y'all, it is I, Harriet Tubman. Are y'all ready to go north?" And then Julia Roberts leads the group on their journey from slavery to freedom. Sounds like a box office smash, doesn't it? It did in 1994 to a studio executive that screenwriter and producer Gregory Allen Howard was dealing with when he was shopping his newly written script for his movie Harriet that opened earlier this month. I mean, it makes perfect sense. If you put pictures of Julia and Harriet side by side, it's like you're seeing double. Mr. Howard, who also wrote Remember the Titans and Ali, told this story in a Q&A he was giving about the movie, saying how the atmosphere in Hollywood was very different 25 years ago. He actually recalled how the exec told him, quote, "The script is fantastic. Let's get Julia Roberts to play Harriet Tubman." After realizing he was serious, somebody pointed out the obvious, to which he said, "It was so long ago, no one will know the difference."
Well, the Harlem riots actually shouldn't surprise anyone. It's only an example of why the passage of the recent Civil Rights Bill in the United States can do actually or absolutely nothing to solve the problems that confront our people there. Despite the passage of this bill, our people are still the victims of brutality, and most of them are being brutalized by the police here in the North, or rather in the North, instead of in the South. It's surprising to me that the racial explosion, hasn't gotten farther out of hand than it actually has. And it's not a reflection of the ability of the New York police to contain the Negroes in Harlem. It's actually a reflection of the ability of the Negroes in Harlem to hold or exercise restraint in the face of the most severe form of brutality. Well, if Goldwater ever becomes president, one thing his presence in the White House will do, it will make black people in America have to face up to facts, probably for the first time in many, many years. And this in itself is good, in that Goldwater is a man who's not capable of hiding his racist tendencies, and at the same time, he's not capable of even pretending to Negroes that he's their friend. So this will have a tendency to make the Negro, probably for the first time, do something to stand on his own feet and solve his own problem, instead of putting himself in a position to be misled, misused, exploited by the whites who pose as liberals only for the purpose of getting the support of the Negro. So in one sense, Goldwater's coming in will awaken the Negro, and it will probably awaken the entire world, more so than the world has been awakened since Hitler.